And we're back with the show once again. It's Gerald coming right back at you, right back at you here. It is Week 11 in the NFL coming up. It's just going to be another great weekend of action. A lot of games that are pretty good on paper. They're nothing that screams you got to see it until Monday. That is. But here to break it down as best he can is our fantasy football guru. Sorry. Got to do my intro for you, man. Got to make you sound good. He is the main man at the Fantasy Football Pater podcast. And if you need any help, any advice, any thoughts and wisdom on your fantasy football team, whether it's lineup changes, waiver wire requests, or trades, check us out today at the Fantasy Football Pater podcast. You can also listen to our full episodes each and every week on the Fantasy Football Pater podcast, on our Pop Culture Cosmos show, on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, and over 30 different podcast outlets. But it's the man himself, the man who is just working. Like he said before we went on the show, he's burning the candle at both ends. And actually, I think it's just like there's just nothing but the wick left. But it is Tyler Baker. I appreciate you gutting it out, man. I appreciate it so much.
Absolutely, man. There's a trickle of light left, but man, it's good to be on the show. And yeah, Week 11. There's a couple good games in there. Yeah.
Well, the game obviously everybody is interested is on Monday night with KC going into Los Angeles. Looks like a barn burner of a game. Defense will be at a premium because everybody will be trying to look forward. I think it's going to be an offensive juggernaut, but a lot of times when we get those offensive type thing, when we get those games on paper that looks like it's going to be nothing but an offensive shootout, buyer beware. Sometimes it doesn't always come to fruition, and it looks like well, I'm going to say probably right now I'm still voting. I'm still believing that it's going to be a high scoring game, but I want to let everybody know that be beware for some possible low scores because of the fact that so many people are expecting such a high shootout between these two teams.
Man, I mean, it's going to be the game of the week. This could be a Super Bowl preview. The two best teams going at it, and I think it's going to be a high-scoring game for a couple of reasons. One, Kansas City defense can't stop a nosebleed. They're just not very good. They've been improving, but they're not very good. And the Rams have quite a few ways that they can hit you on offense. And but on the other side of the ball, the Rams have a really good defense. But Patrick Mahomes has been very good this season at making plays on his feet. So getting flushed out of the pocket and chased down by Aaron Donald or one of the other really good defensive linemen that they have there in Los Angeles. Patrick Mahomes can make plays on the run, can make plays out of the pocket. So I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. Any of your fantasy players in this game, you want to play all of them. I mean, I can't think of a fantasy commodity you might not want to start, except for maybe Sammy Watkins if you have better options. But I think that there's going to be, at the end of the game, there's going to be a lot of points on the scoreboard.
The odds say you're right. Sometimes I've seen them materialize when you have two high power offenses, sometimes for whatever reason, it comes up a little bit short.
Yeah, well, both of these teams have a good running game. So, if it's one of those situations where they want to control the ball a little bit more, maybe increase the time of possession, both of these teams can turn to the ground and do that. But either way, these are two great teams. These are two great coaches. I mean, this is the best team in the AFC going against the best team in the NFC. This is going to be a really good game on Monday night.
Once again, it is Tyler Baker from the Fantasy Football Pater podcast. Catch our shows each and every week on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and over 30 different podcast outlets. There's some other very solid games on the slate coming up this weekend in Week 11 of the NFL. I know a lot of people are pointing towards what Carolina might be doing at Detroit. And this leads me to a bigger question that I asked on the Fantasy Football Pater Podcast Facebook group on my other team. No, not the one that you destroyed last weekend, but
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. But anyways, on the actual other team that I'm actually dominating in my league, I actually happen to have the pleasure of having Jared Goff, Cam Newton, and Ben Roethlisberger.
Oh, wow.
So I sometimes when it falls into the draft like that, I go ahead and I pick up extra quarterbacks looking for trades and whatnot. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes I'm just left with some really quality quarterbacks to choose from. And it looks like that's the case at this point in time, unless somebody offers me something really good in my league. I have 3 quality quarterbacks, and obviously I can only start one. For this weekend, when it comes to all those 3 top-of-the-line quarterbacks, who should I look to start? And if somebody has something similar with a quandary when it comes to one of those 3 or even 2 of those 3 quarterbacks, who are you looking to start above all the others this weekend in the NFL?
Yeah, if you could move one of those guys in a trade before the deadline and get something.
I'm advertising, my friend. I'm advertising it out there. I've offered it. It's just offer my own trades, and just people just kind of say, nope.
Wow.
Asking to a higher price, maybe, but I'm not going to give them up for cheap.
Sure. And that's your prerogative. Hey, it's a good problem to have. Just looking at the matchups, and I'll just say inconsistencies on the road. I think Ben Roethlisberger, you can kind of scratch him off. So that leaves between Cam Newton and you said Jared Goff. Yeah. I like Cam Newton this week against Detroit. Carolina kind of took a whooping last week. Detroit is against the ropes. I would expect Carolina to come out and all but dominate Detroit. But if I had that dilemma, I think I would go Jared Goff. And losing Cooper Kupp, does ding his upside a little bit, but he's going against Kansas City, and the Rams are going to have to put up points to stay in that game. I expect them to come out hot and keep the pedal to the metal. So yeah, I would pick Jared Goff, and I don't think it'd be very close, to be honest with you.
And that's it's kind of surprising in the fact. Well, I'll tell you what. I know you've said before that if you have Cam Newton, you should stick with him.
Yeah.
But I noticed when I asked that question out on to the Facebook group, the answers I got back were a little bit surprising, including Matthew Kirkby actually having me side towards Cam Newton this weekend.
Well, hey, Kirkby is a really smart guy, but I'm going to disagree with him on this one. For the main reason that honestly, it's just the matchup. Detroit's defense, while it's not very scary, I think it's going to give a little bit more of a pushback to Cam Newton than Jared Goff is going to face against Kansas City. Kansas City's defense is just not very good, and there are a couple of teams that if you have a quarterback facing those teams, it'd be Tampa Bay, Kansas City. These are defenses that can be picked on, and I would expect that Jared Goff is going to pick on them this weekend.
Another game which is of high interest to a lot of people out there is Pittsburgh going in without Le'Veon Bell. That situation is done, and they've actually cleaned out his locker, or they were looting his locker and all that, just, adding a little bit of insult to injury there. But Pittsburgh goes into Jacksonville, who has been all over the place.
Yeah.
Leonard Fournette is back. Doesn't look really sharp yet because he had a ton of carries last week. Didn't get a whole lot of yards out of it, but he still scored points for fantasy football owners out there. Your thoughts on the Pittsburgh at Jacksonville matchup, and how important is it for Pittsburgh to go ahead and be dominant, especially for fantasy football owners that have a lot of the offensive players out on the board over there?
Yeah, Jacksonville's defense is just trying to figure out how to put all of this great talent they have in a cohesive unit, and lately it hasn't boded well for them. Leonard Fournette, what was good is that he came back from the injury after missing about a month, and they gave him a full workload. So that's really good to see. So you would be very confident in starting Leonard Fournette because you know that the work is going to be there. Um, is what was the other part of your question?
Is there going to be an issue with people that are playing Pittsburgh Steelers in the offense as far as at
Oh,
any of the skill positions, especially facing a once very vaunted defense? In fact, earlier this year, we were thinking that they would be either one of the top or the top defense in the NFL.
yeah, they're just not playing well right now. This is certainly going to be a test for them. I would not have many reservations in starting your Steelers, although James Conner is a little banged up, so that might open up the door for Jalen Samuels. He's kind of a sneaky pickup now that we know Le'Veon Bell's not going to be back, um, but you're not going to bench Conner until Friday's injury report comes out, and if it looks like he's going to sit, which I really don't think he is, then it's all system goes. You have to play Antonio Brown. You have to play Juju Smith-Schuster. Vance McDonald is the tight end to have between him and Jesse James. Ben Roethlisberger, he's good. He's a good quarterback. He does seem to play not as well on the road, and going into Jacksonville is going to be a test. But Jacksonville's offense, doesn't scare you a whole bunch. So we'll see. It's going to be worth seeing how they um, how Jacksonville responds to a good offense. Jacksonville's season is pretty much over, but they still have their pride to fight for.
One of the other games I want to focus on is I guess, a disappointing team in the Denver Broncos. They're heading into, well, what could be another home game for
Yeah.
them in one of the actual surprises of the league out there. Somebody that outside of myself has flown under the radar because I've touted them all season as a team to watch out for. Not a great team at an elite level, but a team that's been very competitive most of the year in the Los Angeles Chargers.
No, you're right. And they have, I mean, if you manage to pick up Melvin Gordon in into the first or in the second round, you are extremely happy. I mean, he has been so good this season, so good and very consistent. Has a touchdown in just about every game. Good PPR points. Austin Eckler's kind of fallen off a little bit as they just have continued to just feature Gordon. I was looking at the injury report, and I want to say Mike Williams is a little banged up. I can't remember right offhand. But Philip Rivers is outstanding. I managed to pick him up very late in a couple of leagues. And that was one of those quarterbacks where if you went zero QB in your draft, you could get Philip Rivers pretty cheap. It was like Philip Rivers, Matt Stafford, Andrew Luck that you got really cheap. And two of those three have turned out really well. And I would expect the Los Angeles Chargers to just keep rolling. They certainly look like they're going to make the playoffs. And on Denver's side, this was kind of a rebuilding year, and I think they knew that coming into it. They've still got a great defense, so it is going to be a test for that Chargers offense. Case Keenum is kind of showing why he has been a backup for most of his career. Although Courtland Sutton, now that Demaryius Thomas is gone, maybe we can see the young wide receiver there kind of come into his own. Also, the Broncos are going to be getting Royce Freeman back. So if you've had Royce Freeman in your IR spot waiting for him to come back, it looks like he's going to come back this week.
They've won 6 in a row. Their only losses are to the Chiefs and the Rams. So
Yeah.
and those are some pretty good losses if that's the case. So the
Yeah.
Los Angeles Chargers are definitely a team that's flying under the radar, but not for very much longer if they continue their winning ways.
Yeah, and I mean, Kansas City is going to take that division, but right now, looking at the wild card hunt, they're 2 games up. They're 2 games over everybody else. Cincinnati is tanking. Cincinnati is their defense is one of the worst in the leagues. They don't have AJ Green. I mean, the entire AFC North, sans Pittsburgh, is really kind of in the dumps. AFC South is just weird. Who knows? And the AFC East has basically one team in it. So the AFC West is definitely the division. And hey, if Denver starts playing better, there could be 3 teams in AFC West that go to the playoffs. But that's a big if. But right now it looks like Kansas City and the Los Angeles Chargers. I have yet in this episode to call them the San Diego Chargers, and I'm very proud of that.
As am I. I've managed to not do that Freudian
It's
slip
tough.
also. Pat yourself on the back.
Yeah, I know.
I'll tell you what, we made it through without calling them the SD Chargers. Once again, it is Tyler Baker from the Fantasy Football Pater podcast, along with me, Gerald Glassford. Each and every week, we're on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel on Podbean, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, among our other 30 different podcast outlets. Any last thoughts, my friend, on the way out in this wonderful week known as Week 11 in the NFL?
Yeah, there's a Sunday afternoon game I'm going to be looking forward to. That's when the Philadelphia Eagles go into New Orleans. The Eagles, man, I feel like if they had a running game, they'd be much better. But they're still a good football team. They're still the defending champs, and they're in a position where they are 2 games out of the first place in that division, and they're going to be fighting New Orleans. So I would expect that to be a good game. New Orleans is just so good. Drew Brees is just off the chart. So Philadelphia is certainly going to be looking to put some pressure on him. But yeah, as far as the games this weekend, Dallas, Atlanta might be a little fun to watch. But then you have games like Oakland going to Arizona and Cincinnati and Baltimore, and some games that just don't look that good. Minnesota Chicago could be a good game. Vegas has Chicago winning that one. I think actually Minnesota is a better team than the Chicago Bears. So yeah, there's going to be some good games out there this weekend.
It is going to be a great weekend in the NFL. And like I said before, Monday night's going to be a matchup. Hopefully, we won't soon forget.
Yes.
My friend, it's always great talking to you about the football game and all the pigskins and all that good stuff. It's just another great weekend in the NFL coming up, and I'm so glad to talk to you about it. You'll be back on our Monday program, recapping it, and of course, our full episodes coming up as well. Just so great to have you, as always, a part of the show, part of the program right here at the Pop Culture Cosmos.